each fund's a little different. The biggest thing when a founder is fundraising is they should look at a VC or their first check-in as not only money, but ask what else they provide.
Welcome to the Startup Huddle. I'm your host, Josef Maruvčák, and I'm excited to introduce you to the current and upcoming leaders of the startup tech world. We'll discuss digital products and key takeaways for life and professional growth. So grab a coffee and let's huddle up. Perfect. So, hey everyone. Today I would like to welcome Danielle Sosnick, and it's a very interesting guest for me. We recently met, but already starting some activities together. And Danielle has been working in sales and marketing, then started a few startups on her own. Currently, she's the founder and CEO of Altitude. But before that, she was working quite heavily in portfolio support for startups in major VCs. So, welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to share insights and help your community.
Of course. So I would like to talk today about your background, then get into your experience working for a VC, then getting into your experience working with acceleration programs and creating a program of your own, and then maybe diving a little bit deeper into generally speaking your path as a founder, what you learned, what were the toughest, the best moments there. Hopefully our listeners will learn a lot from that. So can we start?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. So Daniel, tell us a little bit more about your background firstly. So currently you are leading Altitude, which you founded, but you had a long way, I guess, until you get here. So what was the way about?
Perfect. Many chapters to get here. I started out in marketing for an electronic medical records company in Wichita, Kansas. Moved into business development where I worked directly with the CEO, and we opened up, I think, like 23, 24 new markets in the US, which led me to come out to San Francisco, where I just fell in love with the startup space. It's like an area with a culture where if you have an idea or a problem you want to solve, people are very supportive and energetic around that. I then moved into my first startup experience, where a group of people, we wanted to disrupt Craigslist. A lot of lessons there. Clearly, Craigslist is still around, so that one did not work out. And then I started my first startup on my own called Kid Carpool, where I helped parents streamline the carpooling space and find new parents to carpool with. I worked with some school districts. And then I worked for an ed tech company, and that one got sold. And then I got recruited by 500 startups, now 500 global, to build out their mentor network, where I staffed over 150 accelerator programs, and then went on to build out their portfolio support for 7 different funds and over 1,800 investments. And then started Altitude just recently. So super excited to share any insights on any one of those chapters.
Perfect. So can you tell us a little bit maybe more about what was the main driver of you coming to San Francisco at the first place? So you mentioned that there was a different mentality here. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's a very different mentality. I don't know how many people here are from the Midwest, but I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and I always wanted to leave and go to a big city. We just happened to be opening up the market in San Francisco, and I raised my hand and begged to be able to come out here. I actually had never been to San Francisco before, and I just packed up my stuff and drove out here. I would say the major difference from a startup standpoint is there are areas that if you come up with an idea, the people that you talk to about it might just say, oh, cool, maybe that'll happen. And then if you're in an area that's very supportive of a startup ecosystem, they tell you who to talk to. They tell you how to continue on with that idea. And it's very encouraging to start startups other than, oh, that's just a funny joke, stick with your day job type thing.
That's very interesting, and I think that's that is mostly the feeling that the founders have here. Now, how long have you been in San Francisco?
10 years probably now. I did
And
go to
is this my
Austin for a
Mhm.
while for an accelerator program, and they also have a pretty good startup ecosystem. Then I came back here. I love it out here.
And is the mentality changing anyway in the past 10 years from what you described, or do you sort of feel that it's been the same? And especially, now during the little bit maybe tougher times on the market.
That's a good question. I would say when I first came out here, I went to quite a few networking events, and how I spent my time was very different than how I spend my time now, where I have an established group of friends and I go out hiking now. So I'm not really in that bar networking scene where I'm testing out those theories. So I think in order to test something, you have to have the same environment and the same test with one variable. And my life has changed so much over the years. I would think it's only growing, more and more people are creating startups. It's probably a harder market, but then there's been times where there are hard markets and I don't think it deters people from starting things. Maybe you crash and burn a little sooner, or maybe you go about it differently. But I think people always have ideas. And if you're in an environment that's supportive of that, you might try it a little differently.
And maybe from the future newcomers to the San Francisco, which I am also, by the way. So we came here. What was it, like 1.5 year ago? Although we had the privilege of already having clients here, but everyone is in a certain way building their network. So if you are a founder and you want to fundraise, you need to meet those investors first. If you have a product company or a service company, you need to somehow find your target client, and it's mostly about networking. So from your perspective, like how difficult it is here in San Francisco to actually build your network, because as you said, you already have a group of friends, established, you know people around. So how long does it take, and maybe how difficult it is from your perspective here?
It takes a while. It takes time to invest and I don't think it matters where you're going. It always takes some effort and you have to put yourself out there and you have to um it takes time to build relationships. So I would look at what groups. Luckily you have like Eventbrite that has all these startup networking events that are pretty cheap that you can go to. There's different communities that you can join. It's not like you go to one event and walk away with like 10 new contacts. It takes going and like putting yourself out there, going to those talks and meeting people, and then you follow up, and it might take some time, but that's how you build relationships. And no matter where you are, that's kind of the process.
And you also have a quite a vast sales experience and marketing experience for most of the, especially the B2B sales. It's kind of a, it's mostly based on the relationship, not mostly based on the relationships, but it's important. People have to trust you, and they need to sort of know that you're around. So and when you come here, you mostly meet completely new people, and there's a ton of them. So how you go about like maintaining those relationships and essentially building those relationships? What is it? Is it meeting those people several times? Is it like you recognize each other at the events, or how does it work? How do you actually build those and maintain those relationships?
It's tough. Sometimes like you can apply the same formula to one person and it works, and then another person and it doesn't work. Focus on building trust first. Don't ask for something. Like your first reach out shouldn't be like, help me do this or buy this. You're in it to help the other person, learn from the other person, and you build that out over time. So make sure you give yourself enough time to build that relationship. And whether or not that relationship pans out for your current startup, or maybe it applies to something else, think of it as a relationship building exercise. Uh, so show up, reach out, see how you can help them, be interested in what they're saying, like do more listening than talking, learn about that person, try to connect people. You can use a basic Excel sheet and say, like, just start building out your new contacts, what you talked about, how you can help them, and then reach out on a regular basis so that you're staying top of mind for them. But own that relationship and work on building trust. It may help out for your current startup. It may help out for an intro to someone else. It could, help for something future. But look at it as, how am I going to build my network here?
Got it. Or maybe start a podcast, right? That might also speed things up. Okay. I then so that's very interesting. It's very similar to what we as Sudolabs have been trying to do in San Francisco. And as you said, um, like trying to help the other people instead of asking for some value from them right away seems to be the key, and then find a way how to manage those relationships and maintain them by like actually having some sort of a database or making sure that you know the people that you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now what is it? It's sort of this brings me to the question about, or the questions about your involvement in 500 startups, now called 500 Global. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you are doing here and how are you helping startups?
Sure. So I was first reached out to build their mentor network, which I thought was very exciting problem to solve. I really like solving problems, which I'm sure everyone in your network does because they're all startup founders. I had previously been through an accelerator program and felt like there were many issues with their mentor program that they had set up. And so when I was reached out to about building this, I was like, well, that'll be fun. I get to build something. I have personal experience. It's a problem I'd really love to solve. I met the team there and they were fantastic. So I started building out their mentor network. Like, how can we make sure that a mentor will stay with a founder from the start of the problem to the end of the problem? So when I went through an accelerator program, mentors would put on chunks of time on their calendar. Like, you could sign up for a 30-minute time block, and that's what you would get. And then maybe they would come back a month later or a little bit later, but you wouldn't necessarily have that problem solved in those 30 minutes. And I think it's not very helpful to the founder to go sit for 30 minutes and talk to someone. Like, there should be, hey, I need help with X. And that person should get you to that endpoint and get you from start to finish. So that's kind of how we started building out the mentor network at 500, is making sure that it wasn't people just show up just so that you can meet them and you can spend a lot of time meeting people. If it's not going to help your startup, I don't think that's very helpful. It's not helping you solve the problem at hand. Then that could be a waste of 30 minutes that you could spend fundraising or getting a new customer. So that's how we built the mentor network at 500, was all around solve this problem, make sure that ticket is closed, and then you can book another mentor session. And then in addition, 500 also runs a lot of accelerator programs. So I think in my 2 years there were about 150 different programs that we staffed and recruited for. So one of the first things I did, because we grew our mentor network from like 20 to about 500 in 2 years, we set up a whole interview process for the mentors. So what is it that makes a good mentor? We interviewed some of our favorite mentors. I asked program managers in the past and founders who the best mentors were. And so we did a whole question and analysis of what makes a good mentor. And then we put that into interview and screening questions. So every mentor that applied to potential mentor that applied to 500, we would take them through an interview process, just like a job. Interview process. We would talk to a founder that they had mentored before, because, for example, you could have someone that has built and sold a company before. Just because they've been able to do that doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to teach someone how to do something. Some people are very good at building, but it takes someone very unique who is able to not only accomplish things, but also break it down and share. So we always talk to a founder to make sure that they had mentor experience and were able to do that. A lot of the accelerator programs require standing up and presenting. So we'd also make sure that they were good presenters. And some people are good at one-on-one time. So we would mark them as like a one-on-one office hour mentor. And then others are very good at putting presentations together and teaching. So that was a different path. So we had a very detailed database for our instructors and tried to help them fulfill their desires of becoming a mentor and making sure we were pairing them with either the right one-on-one mentorship avenue or a teaching position at one of the accelerator programs.
Yes, got it. So maybe the biggest or one of the innovations that you brought to that space was that you were very careful in selecting the mentor and actually creating the methodology and qualification process so that you know who is a good mentor and who probably is not, and then trying to match them with the right startups. Now, how do you incentivize like people that are sort of higher profile, have a lot of knowledge to work for startups? Wasn't this a bottleneck?
It actually was not. And I joined 500 when they were 8, 9 years in the making. So they have a very big global brand, and there's quite a few people that want to be a part of that brand. So our bottleneck was not on the recruiting side, it was on the screening side. And also building kind of a space where founders could provide safe feedback and that they would know that if they had a bad experience with a mentor, that we would remove them from the network. If you're starting out and you don't have 8 years of, brand experience, then you're going to have to spend more work on the recruiting side. I think there's a lot of people out there that want to help, especially founders who have made it and sold a company. They do want to give back. So it's about them deciding where they want to give back. And a lot of the mentors at 500 also work at Techstars, also work at, other accelerators. So they're kind of in the network, and adding one more thing is probably not a detriment to them. And joining someone new, they'd be happy to help out, I'm sure.
And so the way how this works was that essentially, let's say a startup had a problem with their sales, like a B2B sales, and so you found the right person who helped to set up the whole process, the infrastructure, and then essentially, but really deep dive into the problem with them and spend more time trying to tackle the particular problem, right? Okay.
Yes. So we built out a big help desk, and then we had a big mentor network where we had everything tagged on their area of expertise along with their Calendly. So a founder would write in, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. We would send that problem out to like a couple mentors, confirming that that's something they could help them with, and at this particular time, and we'd send the Calendly link back to the founder.
And is like your particular solution, so you were driving that change, I guess, or you were driving
We built it from zero. Yeah.
Okay. And is this something particular for 500 Global? What would you say is the support system that is generally available in the funds for that generally funds make available for their founders here in the Silicon Valley?
I found that if we're switching from, so that's a mix of help desk was on the portfolio support side, and then the accelerator program is more staffing instructors. So if you're looking at different accelerator programs, how they recruit and select their instructors for that accelerator program are all a little different. So some accelerator programs, they'll select, maybe 5 to 10 mentors to work for a 6-month period. And they will go through that accelerator program and then they start over. 500 worked differently because we had so many accelerator programs all over the world. We had a large database and then would put up applications and book those based per accelerator program. So I would say most of the funds, if they're doing an accelerator program, will have maybe 1 or 2 that they run every year. So it'd be a much smaller database, and they'd probably have just a handful of mentors per program. Now, if we're looking at portfolio support, each fund's a little different. And I would say the biggest thing when a founder is fundraising is they should look at a VC or their first check-in as not only money, but ask what else they provide. And some funds don't provide any support beyond the check, or the support that they provide is one-on-one with the person who's writing you that check. So you might have a monthly check-in with that person. You might have a quarterly check-in with that person. Others have thought through their portfolio support a little more. Maybe they were operators in the past in marketing, so they say, we give you a check, but we have marketing experience, so we can work with you on that marketing side. But ask those questions. Ask when the check-in is. Ask how much support you get. If you're at a point where you have a couple different funds that you can choose from, that's something that I think can help go a long way. Some of them might have Series A investors that they can introduce you to. So ask about that. So I would say when you're fundraising, ask those questions about what else do I get besides this check? How are you going to support my business?
And what do you think about the general state of help that funds can currently provide? So is it you would say under average, above? Are there some particular funds that are very good at it, and then the rest of the market is kind of trying to catch up, or what would you say is the current state of the?
I would say the majority of early stage funds provide just the one-on-one support with the investor. Mm-hmm. So ask how many funds that investor has. So for example, if they're on their third fund or their first fund, then that's going to be a little bit different bandwidth to them. So if their support is one-on-one support and they're on their first fund and you're the 10th check-in, you're going to get a lot more hand-holding than you would if it's their third fund and you're their 80th check-in. Like, I don't see how one person can support 80 startups with all the questions. So I would ask, how many investments do they make per year? If it's one-on-one support only that they give, look at how that support's divided up by number of investments they make over the year and the what fund number that they're on.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And from your experience, like what were the key problems that the startups were facing? So what was if there was any particular area or areas that the founders needed the most help with, what would that be?
Sure. So again, I'm going to be talking about early stage startups, which is where 500 was. And I would say the later stage startups are going to have probably totally different problems. And the later stage funds probably have full in-house teams dedicated to support. Like Kusala Ventures has a whole team dedicated to later stage support. So again, these comments are around the early first checks in. With our help desk, we actually tracked the categories, like if it's marketing, sales, fundraising, finance, what type of questions people are answering or asking about. And consistently every month, help with fundraising and help with finance. We're number 1 and number 2. Every single month over a year. So if it's fundraising, let's say some of them maybe have closed their seed round. Some of them were trying to close their seed round after the Accelerator program. That would come to questions about deck feedback, questions around how much to raise, questions about, can you introduce me to so-and-so? Or help, I need a bridge round. A lot of it is intros and reviewing deck and reviewing their fundraising strategy. So if it's an early stage VC, and you're going to want to look at who can they introduce you to, and has that been kind of successful in the past. The other thing is finance, because I would say a lot of founders come in with an engineering background, maybe, or maybe they have a marketing background. Maybe your co-founder is a marketing background and you have an engineering background. And if neither one have been to business school, finance is kind of a whole new world. And how all the investors have a finance background, right? They're looking at you as how do I get my money back plus maybe a 20x return. So learning how investors are looking at your business, how they're assessing it, and then the financial language, you're really setting yourself up for success if you take the time to learn that early on, and not just, I love my product, I want to get it out there, but really understanding it from a business side. That comes down to a financial language.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I would say that like while you were working with early stage founders, I would also say that there would be a lot of demand for some sales help. Um, but I guess that the fundraising is still the number one priority and the number one struggle.
Yeah. So I'd say you could look at it two ways, right? So whether it's fundraising or sales, what is someone asking for? They need more revenue. They need more money coming into their business. Well, it's great if you can get that from sales. But I think a lot of people focus on the fundraising path to get more funding or more cash infusion into their business. Um, but I always think sales are better. It helps you give away
Nice.
less of your company, but that's kind of, both of them are solving the same problem, right? How do I get more cash into my business?
Is there anything changing, you think? Obviously, you are not in that space, or maybe you are, but not that heavily involved. Do you think that, particularly during tough times, such as the current market situation, um, what do the funds do differently now? I'm not necessarily asking about their favorite or preferred valuations of the companies, how much checks they are giving, but what about their portfolio support? Is there some sort of a crisis mode right now going on, and what do you think is happening?
Um, I would say, so if you look at it like a fund, so an investor goes out and raises money for their fund. A fund lasts about 10 years, but they usually maybe make that investment in about a 2-year time period and then hope that pays off over the next 10 years. Um, if you're part of a fund that offers the one-on-one support, and that fund manager has already deployed capital in the current fund, what their focus is on is raising their next fund so that they can keep going. So I think that's going to be a much harder process right now. And it's going to take up a lot more time. So if they're out there fundraising for their fund to keep their business afloat, they're not going to have as much time on portfolio support. So it's all time management. So if you know that your investor is out there trying to raise money for their fund, it's just like you're out there trying to keep your business afloat, so are they. So the time doesn't necessarily match up. Again, the later stage funds have those whole internal teams dedicated to portfolio support. So they're pretty established. I think Tiger Global and Khosla have like really great internal portfolio support teams. I would say it's kind of the earlier stage, smaller funds that you might see less portfolio support, just because the fund managers have less time to give.
That makes a lot of sense. And so so you're working in 500 Global for what was it, 3 or 4 years, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and then how did you? So let's get to the current venture. Let's get to Altitude. So how did you come up with the idea? What problem are you solving? How does it relate to your previous experience at
Perfect.
500 Global?
Yeah, so I really enjoy supporting founders, and I wanted to continue on that path, which is why I started Altitude. What I wanted to provide was more short-term education rather than, currently you can go out, join an accelerator program. It's probably 4 to 6 months long. The assumption is you don't know anything and you need to go through that 4 to 6 month long program. I think there's an opportunity for, short-term topic specific actionable education modules. So you see a lot out there in accelerator programs where you go listen to a cool talk and maybe that's inspirational, but you can't really apply anything to your business right then. And it can be a waste of time, right? So what we've done at Altitude is create really like short-term courses that you can apply to your startup right then. So if you need help with your business model, sign up for a class, get your business model done, keep working on your business. If you need help with growth, you can sign up for the growth mindset course, go do that and move on, rather than having to go through these big, long accelerator programs that's not necessarily tailored to your background.
Perfect. So that means that you are trying to like provide as much value as possible in the quickest amount of time, and the way how you do it is that you or what you mentioned so far is that you are really trying to tailor the programs to the like particular needs of the founder. So like making very specific courses, right?
Cool. Correct. So
Okay.
if you come from a marketing and advertising background, you shouldn't have to sit through a marketing and advertising 2-month course at a accelerator program. Don't take the advertising class. Sign up for the finance class that you don't have a background in and get up to speed on that. So it's really to bridge the gap between the founder's background and what they need to know to build a successful business. And I would say all of our instructors have built and sold companies before and have years of teaching experience and spent quite a bit of time designing a program with specific outcomes. So you know who should sign up for the class and what you're going to get out of it.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come up with the idea? So were you seeing any problems in your previous job, or do you see that this is generally a problem on the market? Why did you start it in the first place?
I think a mix of a couple things. One is I felt like there was not a lot of structured support for, I would say, early stage companies that were a little bit later than first check-in accelerator program. So when we were running the help desk at 500, there were quite a bit of similar questions coming through. And that's after they went to an accelerator program. So why aren't we running programs that people could take, like short-term courses people could take, rather than these one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
here's a document, here's this. It adds a little bit more value. And the other thing is when I went through an accelerator program, a lot of time was spent just sitting for these inspirational talks or going to meet a mentor where it's like, cool, I heard your story, but that doesn't help me right now. So you just feel very strongly that a founder has a very limited time and they need specific help with actionable outcomes. And you need to be able to apply it to your startup, see that improvement, and move on to the next thing.
And what about the so I suspect that your target clients are anywhere between like pre-seed to Series A, B, or are you focusing mostly on the later stage companies?
I would say seed to AB. We have a
And
couple finance courses that are geared towards later stage, like some specific on cash flow management and like being very agile during these times, but majority is going to be seed to A.
mm-hmm. And how do you price your service, or how does it work? So certain acceleration programs, they do it for free because they've already invested their money as a fund. Some of the programs take equity. Some of the programs are paid. So how do you think about that question?
Yeah, so other accelerator programs are usually tied to a fund. And I would say it's not necessarily free. It's usually tied to the cap table. So let's say the VC says they're investing 150,000. They'll be on your cap table for 150,000, but maybe your cash infusion is only 110,000 because they're actually using that for you're paying for the accelerator program. Um, so I haven't seen a true free accelerator program. we are today we've been reaching out to uh, different VC funds. So we have kind of like some bulk pricing. But our programs that are direct to the founder, we try to offer it as low as a price point as possible so that it's accessible, but then we're still able to pay for the really great instructors because sitting in with a so-so instructor, you're not really going to get those outcomes. So we want those high quality programs and instructors for you.
And how do you go about getting the clients? So is it that most of your clients are getting, you're getting them directly through some marketing campaigns, or you partner with VCs and you do it for them, as you mentioned, or you partner with government? Like, what's exactly is your go-to-market strategy and client acquisition strategy there?
I would say we're testing out a couple things, like many of the early stage founders. So we've been reaching out to VCs and we've been speaking to them about portfolio support and offering these programs to help them better support their portfolio. We actually are also talking to governments about startup ecosystems and seeing if they need support there. So we're in talks, I would say, with a couple different markets, and then we're also offering it to startups directly. So if a startup's needing help, we want to be able to do that.
That makes a lot of sense. You are also a startup in a way, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot to discover.
there's a
What
lot
do
of
you
things
think?
to test and learn out, and
Yeah.
if there's one that's working better than another, then we'll maybe put more focus on that. We're also reaching out to startup communities, so we're offering kind of deals for specific startup communities that want to support their community.
Hmm. And what about the future? So, what do you see altitude becoming? Maybe let us step back. So, where are you right now, and what do you want to achieve in like 3 to 5 years with the company?
Oh my goodness. Haven't thought about that. I'm in such testing mode. I just want to see kind of what works the best. Um, ideally, so we've had our first customers and have proposals out there, and we've got some great events coming up. So that's kind of where we are right now. Um, 3 to 5 years seems so far off. I would love to say that we have helped in 3 years, I would say 5,000 startups like
Hmm.
solve some significant problems that they've had in their business and they've seen that, success.
That's kind of an ambitious goal, right? Ambitious goal, right? But
Super,
also,
super
if you
ambitious.
succeed, if
You
you
asked so
succeed,
far down the line.
yeah, yeah. If you succeed, there's gonna be a major impact on the scene. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
What about now? What about your maybe right now? I'd like to talk a little bit more about your personal experience as a founder.
Sure.
Um, so you were uh, multiple founder. So you founded your companies multiple times. You also worked for the VCs. Uh, from you worked also in sales and marketing. What do you like? What part of the job or what job you like the most, and maybe why? The whole cycle ended again with your own company, so I guess that you like being a founder. If you could tell me what motivates you, what do you like about being a founder?
Um, I like solving problems and learning. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what a founder does, right? You have an assumption, you see a problem in the world, you don't see a solution to it. You have an idea of how to build that out. and you run a bunch of different tests, and you're going to learn a lot from that. So if you're curious about learning, I think it's an exciting journey. Um, it's also full of disappointments. Like all your assumptions could be incorrect. So you have to keep a very open mind. You have to be very flexible. That's where pivots come in. So let's say you run 10 experiments because you thought your idea was fabulous. There's nothing out there that solves it. You can run 10 experiments and then you're like, oh shoot, nobody wants this. I'm the only one with this problem, or maybe only 10 other people have it, which means it's not really a business. But hopefully you learn from those experiences and can kind of pivot into something else. Um, so I love learning. I love running experiments. I love like trying to solve problems and creating solutions. The hard part, the things that I don't like is sometimes if things aren't working out, that hard part that you have to push through to learn something, that's always, you have to, it's a long game, right? So you're going to have some definite dips that you have to keep going and be flexible and open and be willing to pivot. I also I do not like cold outreach. I am not like a
Mhm.
born salesperson that likes cold calling. So I always have to break up the parts of it that I don't like. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, well, if you do 10 of these, then you can go for a little hike outside or something. So you have to reward yourself for the parts that you don't like, and don't get so caught up on the parts that you do like that you forget to, put effort into the areas that are not your favorite parts.
And talking about the dips and how difficult the role is in itself, what were maybe the toughest moments so far on their journey, either in altitude or uh, in your previous ventures such as Kid Carpool? What were the parts that were really the toughest ones?
Hmm. I would say with altitude, we are so new that we haven't gotten to the toughest parts yet. um, I'd say with Kid Carpool, the hardest part was um, I ended up shutting that down. But the hardest part was having some users really love it, but I didn't have enough revenue to justify the cost of the spend. So I couldn't figure out the business side of it without a large capital infusion to give you that runway to test it out. And it would be a big gamble. So it's really hard to see a problem, find some people that also have that problem. You've created a solution for it, but from a business side, it just doesn't make sense. So maybe it should have been a hobby or a side gig or something like that. So realizing those parts, it's hard to let go.
Yes, I guess that many founders face the same problem. They fell in love with their idea. Some of their users fell in love with the idea too, and then it's just the
Mhm.
market is brutal, and it's kind of there
Yeah,
are all the other things that need to work out for you to succeed, right?
there's a lot of things. It's
Mm-hmm.
timing. It's so many different things, and something that maybe worked 10 years ago wouldn't work now because it's a totally different market. Um, that I say you just learn, and then when you've healed from that, you're going to find another problem, and you can apply those lessons to it. But knowing when to stop, I think, is a hard lesson
Mm-hmm.
to learn. And if you look at the metrics, a lot of startups don't make it, and there's not a lot of talk around how do you decide. And looking back, I think that people are not very direct. Um, so some people that probably could have told me, hey, if you don't do A and B, it's not going to work out. It took me 6 months to figure that out on my own, which might have been nice if someone was a little more direct with me sooner. So I think it's something you have to figure out on your own, unfortunately. Um, when's the right
And so,
time to stop?
and so when you should stop, you think? Is there any? Is it a case by case? Or is there any particular learning you got from that? Like a
It's
not a
it's
learning,
gonna
but like maybe a. process or,
It's going to
advice?
be case by case, and that's going to be kind of on the individual, right? Um, and your individual situation. So let's say it's someone who has a full-time job and is working on this on the side. They could keep it going as long as they want because maybe they like putting 10%, 20% of their salary into their side hustle. And they're okay doing that forever and it doesn't like impact them. If you have quit a job and don't have revenue, and are putting all of this in, you're going to have a set time frame to where you can't continue working on it after a certain amount of time. So I think when you start something, you need to decide, am I starting this as a side hobby and hopefully it turns into something? Am I starting this as like a small business where I just hope to make enough money to pay my own bills and I'm going to give myself 6 months to test that out? Or am I trying to build a VC-backed company where I'm going to be on that fundraising journey for many, many years and hopefully I get bought or go IPO? So there's a couple different directions to go and there's no right or wrong answer. I think you just have to decide that. And I think so many people talk about just fundraising and you have a successful startup if you fundraise. You have a successful business if you like make more money than you're
Yeah.
spending. And there's no right or wrong answer into the type of business that you're building. You just have to decide, I think, at the beginning, I'm willing to
Mm-hmm.
do this and I need to hit this by this time and then make that decision.
I think you're completely right, and what we can also see on the market is that, or at least the market that was here 3 years ago, um, 1 year ago, that the only way it seemed as if the only way of doing business was to raise venture-backed money, right? Even though your startup maybe was never going to make it because simply the math simply and the business
Mm-hmm.
the business model doesn't add up. Um, so to brighten things up a little bit, what were maybe the best moments so far? The moments you are really proud of?
Oh gosh, getting your first customer is so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
You spend all this time, you have your idea, um, you spend a lot of time working on the solution. And I think the best part is when you get that first customer and they are just as excited as you are about something that you have spent a long time building, whatever type of product that is and whatever type of business it is. I think building a business is a really long journey. And anytime you can take a moment to just celebrate those small wins, regardless of whether your business works out or not, like just take those moments. Be like, look what I just accomplished. This is cool. Like you got your MVP out. That's cool. Take a moment and just be like, look what we accomplished. And if you kind of celebrate those small wins along the way, rather than always pushing towards the next one, I think it's really important just to pause and just recognize what you've done. But first customer is the most exciting for me.
And this ties very well to the my next question, which we talked about how difficult it is to be a founder and how it always changes. You have those dips. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of stress. It's mostly on you, and your work really matters. So, how do you deal with all that kind of stuff? How do you deal with the stress and mm,
Mm.
and keeping friends and family and all these other pleasant things that people should be doing, but it's hard when you're running a business.
It's super hard. And I would say earlier in my career, I would sacrifice all of that for the business. And I don't think that's a good path to follow. Um, you come out of it at the end of the day with not seeing people for a long time, not taking care of yourself. It's not a healthy path. Um, I would say the biggest thing to realize is the results of your business It's not personal. So don't tie your personal self-worth and self-esteem to the outcomes of your business. It's super brave to try something. You're going to learn whatever you learn, regardless of the outcomes. Just take care of yourself and take care of your relationships. So if obviously a customer is needing help, take a pause and go help that, but don't sacrifice your life for something, and don't take the outcomes of your business personal. Don't beat yourself up about that. So figure out a way to dissociate or separate the two. Working out's really important. I always like to go to the gym. If I accomplish something in the gym, I'm a lot calmer to whatever disappointments are during the day. I'm like, okay, cool. Take time off over the weekend. Go outside. It's healthy. Sometimes you solve a problem being away from your business, and you see things a lot clearer than you do if you're constantly behind your laptop.
And why do you think it's not personal? So I'm not saying otherwise. I'm just saying that it is hard to realize that. So
It's very hard.
how you go about it? Because I think that that's what most of the people are trying to tell themselves. It's not my fault. It's not my worth. This is I'm not the business. I'm like a separate person. How you go about it?
I went about it the hard way. So I would say one of my companies, I took it very personal. And it was through that failure that I realized that my friends and family didn't care if this business worked out. Like, they care about me as a person. Like, me giving up all of these things for this company didn't help me out. And just, it took that crash and fail to realize that people are just excited that you're trying something. Like, you might be totally crushed that one of your tests doesn't work out. Your friends and family are going to be like, oh, cool, you tried it. They're not judging you based off of the outcome of your startup. They're not going to think less of you based off of the outcome of your startup. So it really is, you as a founder need to somehow realize that. And you'll be a lot healthier and in the long run if you could get to that point.
That's some great advice right here. Maybe this brings me to my last question. How did you go about finding a co-founder, and how important co-founders are, you think, in running a business?
For one, that's a great. I'm laughing because for one, I couldn't find one. I looked everywhere. And for the other one, it just like magically happened. And when I was going through the Accelerator program, and I thought I was going to find a technical co-founder during that process, and it did not work out. And the people that I thought were going to help me just sat down and told me, oh, I happen to be college roommates with my technical co-founder. I was like, well, that doesn't help me at all. So finding a co-founder is very hard if they're not someone in your inner circle already. I would say that look at what your business is. And for me, I didn't have a technical background, so I was looking for a technical co-founder. I think there's a lot of people that are in that same boat. And that's a very difficult find. I wish that I had, tried to build the MVP on my own or taken time to do some coding classes. You have to really love working with someone. So I'd say a lot of startups start a business with someone that they've worked with before. Those are the ones that usually, I would say, get funded, because one of the VC questions is going to be, how do you know this person? Because they want to make sure that you work well together. So I did actually meet someone randomly through a job post, because at a different place I was, job posting, trying to find someone. And we worked on a couple of projects together outside of the startup just to see if we liked working together. One of the people, it worked out. Another one was a crash and burn. So whether you need a co-founder or not really depends on the business you're trying to build, whether you have all the skill sets and can hire out the ones that you don't have, or whether the skill sets you need are crucial to your business. I would say if they're crucial to your business, you need to take the time to find someone, because that's going to most likely make or break it down the road.
And how long did it take you? We are talking about a co-founder for Altitude?
No, this was a past one. For
Okay,
Altitude, it was a different story. I found them quite quickly because it's someone I had worked with at 500.
Okay.
So when
Perfect.
I first took the idea and went around at another company, I couldn't find one. So it's always more fun to work with people.
Yeah. And especially given how difficult it is, right? You want to have.
Yeah, but it has to be someone you like working with. If it's someone you don't like working with, it makes it extra hard. So take the time to build your team. Team's very important.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's all from my end, Danielle. Thank you very much for coming. I think a lot of useful advice. I wish you all the best with Altitude, and hopefully we'll speak and see each other soon.
All right, thank you so much. Have a great day.
And that's it for today's episode of the Startup Huddle. Thank you very much for listening, and make sure to catch all episodes on thestartuphuddle.com and follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter for more insights and updates on the world of startups. Thanks again for tuning in.